Hi friends, welcome back. Hopefully you are now comfortable with Power BI navigation. Now we are going to move ahead. For now we are going to use a sample dataset, the same one which I have shown you in the last lecture. So let's click on this try a sample dataset. Power BI comes loaded with a sample dataset which we can use for training. This is a sample dataset which is optimized for data analysis, so you won't have to do a lot of data cleaning with it. Therefore, it makes sense to use it at this stage. So now click on load sample data. But don't worry, later we will use complex data sets from multiple sources while covering advanced topics of Power BI. For now, I don't want to complicate matters. So you don't need to procure dataset from an external source. For now, just use this dataset. If you click on these names or checkboxes, it will load data in preview where you can review the datasets. Both are same datasets. If you review, you will find that it is a sales dataset with sales figure, dates, countries, product categories, and segments. It is a well optimized dataset for data visualization. If you remember from one of the earlier videos where I have talked about the workflow of the data analysis project, I have mentioned that workflow will include first, getting data, that is, importing data in Power BI, second, data transformation, third, handling hierarchy and relationship within data, and if needed, we can create more columns or tables, which I will show you in a later video. And finally, data visualization. So, data visualization is the last step, or second last step, where after data visualization, you will publish the report and share it with your team, where Power BI service comes into the picture. So, for now, we are just going to focus on Power BI desktop. Normally, at this stage, you will click on Transform Data to open Power Query Editor and transform data. But I want to show you an alternate navigation to Power Query Editor. So I will load dataset for now. We are not going to do data visualization at this stage because we are not ready yet. So we first need to transform data. Now, depending upon your computer's memory and CPU, loading data should take few seconds to few minutes. But most modern computers should be able to handle it quite comfortably. So by default, you will always land in Report Builder when you load the dataset into Power BI. But now we need to find Transform Data tab, which is in Relationship tab. So first tab in the left hand navigation is Report Builder. Second tab represented with this table icon is Data tab. And the third tab is Relationship tab, where you will normally go to set up relationship and hierarchy. So let's move to that tab, click on it. So in this tab, if you look at the top menu, we have a tab for transform data. This is the same tab which you saw earlier while loading dataset. If you click on it, it will open Power Query Editor, where we need to transform data while loading dataset. So there are two options to access it. Transform data while loading the dataset, which is initial step when you are importing the data in the Power BI. And the second method is when you transform data after loading the dataset into Power BI. So normally you will transform the data while loading, but you will still need to come back to this tab and update it at later stage. So that's how most of the project work will happen. In real life, you will have to move back and forth. So we need to know both of these methods to access this tab. You should be amazingly comfortable with this screen. I mean, when I say amazingly, I mean it. This is where you are going to spend most of your time, or at least a lot of your time. Alright, so let's start with data transformation. So whenever you are working on data transformation, you need to follow this framework, or you can say target following aspects of data. First is data hygiene. So data hygiene simply means that if data is clean or not. Do we have all the values we need, or there are any missing values? I have shown you this in one of the earlier videos. For example, if we take this unit sold column. So in this spreadsheet, in this data set, it is represented in column, but for us, it's a variable. So let's say there are few rows with no values here. You have NA or nothing in it. In that case, you need to come up with an approach to handle missing information. In one of my earlier videos, I have mentioned that common practice could be to use mean or median if there are a few values missing here. But if there are a lot of rows missing here, like 10-20% of the overall data set, you need to figure out a way to get additional data to compensate for the missing data or get this missing information. Or you can simply drop these rows from your analysis. Because if you have, let's say, 1000 observations, which is 1000 rows, now let's say 20% is missing, which means you don't have 200 values. Now you can imagine it could significantly impact your analysis. I mean, it could skew the analysis towards any direction which may not be the intended purpose of the project. So we need to figure out whether we should keep the information as part of the data analysis project or we should simply drop it if we cannot get additional data to compensate for the missing information. But let's say if there are only few values missing out of 1000, let's say 10, 20, even 30, you can easily use mean or median to replace the missing values. That will keep your analysis within expected range. So if your mean is, let's say, 50, and if you are using 50 to replace the missing values, it shouldn't introduce any large deviations. So that's why it's very important to review the data for the hygiene and develop a sense whether we have enough data, whether the data is clean or not. Let's say you only have 50 observations and 20 of them doesn't have any value. Now in that case, you can't come up with the right conclusion if you were to go ahead with this analysis based on just 60% of data. Let's say you have, so always review how much data you have and how much data is missing. Few percent here and there is fine, but anything more than 10% should alarm you. Always consult your senior data analyst, try to find additional data, but never go ahead with this analysis because it won't produce good results. Second thing I want to highlight here is format of your data, which is very important. Now when you upload or import your data into Power BI, it will automatically assign data types to your columns or variables. Now you should always review it. It's very important because most of the time you will need to update it. To update it, you need to click in the left hand corner of your column where you have this ABC or 123 written. When you click on it, it will present a drop down like this where you can see all the available options. For example, let's say look at this unit sold. Now it is set to decimal value or decimal type. Now you can imagine that you can't sell something in fractions. So unit sold, the number of units sold should always be a whole number. Now of course, if you are dealing with something where you know it is possible, please go ahead, keep it. But a lot of time, in fact most of the time, it will be a whole number. You can't sell cars in fraction, you can't sell computers in fraction, right? So a lot of things which we buy cannot be sold in fractions. So it's very important to review this information and change it. Similarly, if you are dealing with money, so here you have currency or dollar, rupee, any other currency. Now the money can be in cents or rupees or paisas. So it can be in fraction. And if you are dealing with a data set where you have 1,000,000 observations, now if 10% observations are missing decimal values or values after fraction just because Power BI has set it to whole number, your entire equation, your entire calculation is going to go haywire. Your entire calculation will deviate a lot from the expected path, the expected range. So whenever you are dealing with money, always make sure that you change it to fixed decimal number. And Power BI does that essentially to optimize the performance. Let's say you have 1,000,000 rows, and if Power BI is just storing whole number, the data will be much more compact. So we need to review all columns and ensure that everything is assigned proper data types. Dates should be well formatted in order to support proper data visualization. Anything in percentage should be assigned correctly. For example, if you have percentage and they are assigned something like decimal values or fixed values, it won't help. So always ensure that everything is in proper shape before you move forward. And the third point, a very important point, is data review for performance. In our first step, we reviewed if we have all the values in all the rows, which simply means that all observations are captured or not. But we also need to review if we need that variable or not. Variable simply means this column here. So all these columns are variables because a lot of time you may have unnecessary columns or variables in your data set. So whenever you are working on a project, you first need to identify all the variables, which I have mentioned in one of the earlier videos, independent and dependent variables. When you are loading your data set into Power BI, see if this data is having any additional unnecessary information. Let's say you have 50 columns, 50 variables, but for this particular project, we only need 10. Now, if you continue with this original data where we have 50 columns, this is going to impact your performance. Power BI will have to manage the entire data set. It doesn't know whether you only need 10 or 20 or 50. Whatever you load into it, Power BI will handle that. So always make sure that you only upload or import what is required. So performance is going to be a key factor when you are working in real life scenarios, actual companies, because you will have these large data sets where if you don't pay attention to required independent and dependent variables, you will usually end up with a lot of unnecessary information. Now, Power BI does take few steps to optimize performance. For example, a lot of time you will see when you are reviewing the data type, the currency is formatted to something like whole number instead of fixed decimal number because Power BI is essentially trying to reduce the size of the data. For example, if you are storing $500.75, so 75 cents, which makes a lot of difference to our analysis, but Power BI doesn't know whether it's money or not. So it may simply truncate it and remove that 0.75 in order to reduce the data size. Because if you're loading a data set with a million rows, a million observations, then imagine the kind of impact these values could have on the overall memory or performance if we have two values after decimal. So that's why a lot of time you will see that Power BI will simply automatically assign some whole number or some other data type to currencies, to money, and you will have to go back and change it to fixed decimal number, because if you don't do that, your report will be inaccurate. Okay, so 3 things for now: data hygiene, format of your data, and data review for performance while loading, whether we need all these variables or not. So let's take a pause here. Now you already know that we are going to change data type for these, and I have already shown you some of these. So this is kind of your assignment. Review all these columns, apply your wisdom, thought process, and change their data type according to your opinion. Now in the next video, I'll show you what I have done, and we will continue with this project. Thank you.